think, for students that are entrepreneurial is really identifying what success means to them. Because a lot of people think just because you have money means you're successful. And, if you want to change the world, it might not be money that you're seeking. It might be implementing something that lifts other people up or helps people that can't help themselves.
All right. Welcome to the Compounding Interest Podcast. My name is Jesse Rogers, and I am very excited today to have a guest with us. Dom Macri is a wealth manager, and he's worked with Ray Dalio. That's his Clark Kent job, working as a wealth manager, but he is also a Superman in our community, working for some nonprofits. He's on the board of several in Palm Beach County. And so Dom, take it away and tell us a little bit about how you got here.
Well, I always say it's been an interesting journey. Well, first, thanks for having me on. I didn't take a straight path to where I am today. It's been a very windy road, you might say. So, like you mentioned before in the invite, parents were immigrants, owned pizza shops. We moved back and forth to different locations and settled outside of Philadelphia. I started working in the pizza shop at a young age. We were basically, me and my siblings were free labor for my parents. When people talk about the minimum wage, I say, what minimum wage? I didn't get paid at all. So
paid in experience, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, right.
My minimum wage was, can I go to the movies? And then they'd give me $20. That was basically what my wage was. So, and then it was the first of my family to go to college. Unfortunately, when I turned 18, I was about to go to college. My parents went bankrupt. So I basically had to support myself going forward. And, I commuted to work. Commuted to school, and really I wanted to be a teacher. So I wanted to be a special ed teacher for elementary school because I was really close to my the teachers that I went to elementary school with. And I guess junior year, I hated college. I couldn't stand college because I really just worked primarily, and college was like a side thing. So I really kept telling my friends at school, like every semester, I want to quit. And they're like, you always say that, but you never quit. So we're just assuming you're going to finish it. So finished college. And then actually junior year switched from education and communication. And then decided I didn't want to work at a radio station for 20 years, making very low wages. And got a job at TransUnion because of my mother-in-law, my now mother-in-law's friend worked there for a year and a half, and then went into the Chase credit card department in Delaware. And that's really where my career took off. So 2000, it's ironic, 9/11, 2000, I started. And then obviously 9/11 happened, but then I ended my career at JP Morgan, 9/11, 2012 in Florida, which is very symmetrical the way that happened. But started working in the credit card department, moved my way up into a team leader role, worked really hard. I was like an efficiency expert. I've always looked at things, trying to make things better. So as I would learn, I would create job aids for my coworkers so that they can do their job better. And I remember a red, yellow, and green light thing that I created that said, red light, basically stop if you see this on an application or on a credit report, and decline it or review it. Yellow is be hesitant, and then green was just approve it and assign a line of credit, basically. And I think they still use it today, basically 20 years later. But it was great learning experience. And I just took every opportunity that I was afforded in different roles. I worked Sunday through Thursday. I worked 2 to 11. I worked all the different shifts. And then in 2003, I kind of looked around. I thought to myself, everyone in Delaware works for a credit card department, MBNA, Discover, Chase, all those companies. And I took a job over in the JP Morgan operations, private bank operations side, and learned the fees, how to calculate fees for math, as you were talking about earlier, math for trust accounts, and made my way up to the team leader role there. And then I got an opportunity to go to the JP Morgan Trust Company of Delaware because of my connections through the fee group. And I became basically the go-to guy for any issues. And when I went over to the JP Morgan Trust Company of Delaware, that's where I started working with very high net worth clients, which was a complete change of perspective, where I thought $1 million was a lot of money. Now I'm working with people that have, $1 billion. So it was a complete mind shift of what the world was like, which basically changed my path, and got my MBA at a local business college in Delaware. And then I went and got my master's in taxation at Villanova University, and just kept educating myself. I was the sole, breadwinner of the family, and I knew I had to succeed for my family. So kind of pushed me to learn and do more. And in 2010, I came down to Florida, worked here for a couple of years at JP Morgan. And then I got an opportunity to go to work for Ray Dalio's family office in Connecticut. Did that for 18 months. Worst winter in the world up there. It was freezing. Once you come to Florida, your body gets used to this heat pretty quickly. So left, I came back down here, and I've been here ever since. Worked at a couple RIAs, and now I'm at US Bank as a wealth planner.
So I've got a ton of questions, but first I want to introduce Kevin, who introduced you and I. So I just wanted to say a quick thank you for Kevin for helping us to make that connection.
Two good guys I know. You guys got to talk to each other.
I appreciate that. So what of the things that you were talking about, there's a couple things that I noticed that maybe would be helpful to the listeners as far as where they're at in life and putting those pieces together. So at the beginning, it sounds like you worked a lot without really seeing the reward for it initially, right? So you kind of, you started with just a habit of work, it sounds like, until it just became, you had this discipline where whether you loved going to college or not, you were still going to class, whether you got paid for working at the pizzeria or not, yeah. you went. So maybe elaborate a little bit more about that. Did you know that things would turn out so well for you, or was it just a leap of faith or?
Well, I remember when I was a kid, me and my brother, he's a year younger than me. He's a command sergeant major in the Army now in Europe. And he and I would sign up for sports teams. And then when things got hard, we'd quit. And I remember my dad saying, look, I'm not doing this anymore. If you start something, you got to finish it. And that basically, ever since he said that to me, I've always stayed with things. So I didn't really, I couldn't quit, because in the back of my mind, that was the philosophy I had. So I think, perseverance, hard work, and just not giving up were something that I learned a lot at the pizza shop, making boxes, working while my friends are all out. So it almost taught me delayed gratification, right? So my friends are all going out Friday and Saturday. They're the busiest nights at the pizza shop. So obviously I'm working, and that was it. I had to do it. So I kind of learned just delaying gratification and focusing on what I was doing and my tasks and doing it the best of my abilities. And I mean, you never know how things are going to turn out. I obviously never thought I'd be where I am now, 20 years ago, 25 years ago. But I think I always try to lead with integrity. Like I always try to think outside of myself. How am I affecting the people around me? I'm a good listener. I try to solve problems. And I think if you do those things fundamentally, you're going to be successful, because the people around you are going to want to see you succeed. So my managers would give me opportunities because they knew I would take the opportunity, and I was a hard worker. And I just trusted, I luckily had people I always say, and I said this to you when we spoke the first time, and I say this when I talk to other people, is I feel like God always placed people in my life at the right time to make sure I was on the right path. And it's not a blind faith. I think it's more of just trusting your gut and doing the right things. And sometimes it doesn't work out for you financially, or, you know, to be honest with you, when I moved to Connecticut, that was not a financially good move for me. It was a horrible, horrible financial move. But the learning that the evolution that I had personally from that experience was priceless. So although financially it was horrible, I met so many great people. I learned so much about myself, and it really helped me become a better person, both for my family as well as for my community and for the people I work with. So, I think you always have to take something from those experiences and then, make them what you want them to be. Don't let other people say, well, you're a failure. I'm not a failure. I've failed. I mean, most people have, but I'd rather fail the way I've failed than be successful without any roadblocks or obstacles, because it wouldn't be as interesting or educational for me.
So what's your self-talk like when you do get a failure? Because I've known many students that, they'll sort of crumble when they get that low grade, or there's so many entrepreneurs that face a little bit of resistance on the front end, and you just kind of have to go through that to get over that wall and to get things to click for you. But most people, I think that's really where it is for most people, is that they falter because they don't have that persistence, and they just don't hang in there long enough to succeed. So what was it about maybe your mentality or your self-talk that helped you over that obstacle?
I think there's a few things. One is I had to overcome a lot of things as a kid. I was really overweight, grew up in a very diverse community. So I kind of had to overcome a lot just to get to where I was in college. And I think those things teach you a lot about resiliency and perseverance. So you definitely, the way I talk to myself now is definitely different than the way I talk to myself, probably, before college. But I think for me, there wasn't an option to fail. Like, I had to succeed. So I had to make it work. And I tell people that from 13 to 40 was basically survival mode. So I didn't have a chance to sit back and say, oh, poor me, I failed, or someone yelled at me, or someone got mad at me because I made a mistake. I had to basically get over it and move forward. I didn't have I didn't have the option to sit back and go stop doing things, right? I got married young, I had kids young, and I bought a house young. All those, things that I did, I didn't realize it at the time, but they basically made me succeed because I had to. Or if I failed, my whole family would fail, and I couldn't allow that to happen. So when I get bad news or I get bad grades, which I've had in the past, or I do something stupid, I made mistakes a lot in my career. I actually beat myself up pretty bad sometimes, but before now I give myself like a minute to just get pissed off and yell or get angry, and I say, all right, calm down, how do we solve this problem? And I give myself the moment to just vent, and then I just say, okay, how do we get over this, and let's move forward. All right. Grades for me, I was never I was a good student in high school, but in college I was an average student. Just because I had to work. I worked all three degrees. I worked full time basically. So I wasn't, for me, it was more about survival at that point than getting straight A's. I was happy being a B student. I was like, okay, I'm fine. I'm not going to be perfect. But I think you have to give yourself the moment to just be upset, but then say, okay, let's stop pitying ourselves. Let's get through it. Let's go talk to the professor, or let's go talk to the boss, or whatever. I remember one of my close friends who actually I work with at JP Morgan and now is at Dalio's family office. I made a mistake. I paid insurance premiums out of the wrong trust. And I was really pissed off about myself, but I caught it. And I beat myself up really bad because it was a really big, important client. And I went in and talked to him, and he's like, look, you're beating yourself up way more than I'm going to beat you up. So he's like, you sounds like you got it under control, so I'm not going to say anything. And when I fixed the problem and I called the family office to let them know what happened, they were like, thanks for letting us know. We appreciate you being proactive and taking care of it. And I thought they were going to rip me a new butthole, but they were very like, okay, thanks, and from those kind of taking ownership of things and saying, hey, I took care of it, I found it first, I'm going to fix it. That's what propelled me to be successful, because they were like, this guy's not waiting for someone to tell them that there's something wrong. He's making sure things are right. And I think those kind of, taking responsibility, ownership of your work, and not blaming someone else. Like, you did something wrong. You didn't you got a bad grade because you didn't study or you procrastinated or whatever. Everyone wants to find someone else to blame, but a lot of times it's just us, and we just have to learn from those struggles and mistakes and be better.
Yeah, I love that, because that reminds me of David Goggins. What he likes to say is, Roger that, how do I get better? So, okay, I'm not good at reading. Roger that, how do I read faster? I'm not good at this. I'm overweight. I'm whatever it is. Roger that, how do I get better? And that's how he became a Navy SEAL and reached really high heights. And so it sounds like you have that same kind of mentality where you're leading with integrity, and you're not allowing any excuses, right? So you have maybe a temptation to not want to face how badly you screwed up, or how, that something is within you. But actually, if the mistake is with you, then that's an opportunity that you now have control to correct it and to fix it. If something's external, then you have less control over it. And so that way you have less ability to change your circumstance. So it's actually good news when you find out that you've screwed up, right?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't think about it that way for a long time, but then, once I started working with Ray, his biggest thing is learning from your mistakes and failures. And he doesn't mind if you make mistakes. He just says it's a learning opportunity. The problem is if you keep making the same mistake. So what I've realized in life is that if you don't face things appropriately and deal with them, they're going to keep presenting themselves, because life's always going to try to teach you that same lesson until you figure it out, right? And so one of my biggest weaknesses, and I fail at this all the time, is trying to help people too much. And then eventually I get screwed because I'm helping people. And I actually came up with an analogy of it is, you can help people that know what they want and that are trying to succeed up the ladder of success, or if you're just helping people randomly without any goals in mind, you're basically holding a wobbly chair as they're putting the noose around their neck.
Yeah.
And you really have to understand what people's motivations are and what their goals are before you help them, because sometimes just helping people just to help people is not the right way to do it. Sometimes people have to learn from their failures, and you can't really let them suck you into those things, especially if they're not prepared to deal with it.
That's a particularly important lesson for instructors, because you can let people off the hook and, oh, I'm not going to count this grade. And, oh, we can find some points for you here. You don't have to fail the class. And that can really mess them up in the future, because then they expect that in future classes. They don't hold themselves accountable. So, I think we're coming to the same place from maybe different angles, but yeah, I've definitely learned that as well. Guy, you're an instructor, and you've been teaching for a while now. What are your thoughts on that, or do you have other questions for Dom?
Well, yeah, I agree with you 100% there, Jess. We can't set up bad habits, especially the courses that I teach. I teach courses where it's the first time a student is coming into college, most likely, and so I'm very, very deliberate in what I said as foundations and expectations, because I don't want to set someone on their college trajectory on the wrong way. But and I'd also like to talk about leadership, but the one question that's been burning my whole time, and you kind of started it earlier, Jesse, and I kind of think towards the audience of our podcast here, I interact with in the math lab, with a lot of students that say, I'm studying business, or I want to open my own business, or I'm studying entrepreneurship or management or whatnot. Dom, my question is, what do you think is the biggest thing that's holding some of these young entrepreneurs back? I don't know if you work with a lot of them or whatnot, but I tend to notice that I see them running into walls and dead ends a lot. And you kind of mentioned, your path to success and some of the virtues that made you end up where you were. I'm just kind of wondering, is there something that you see that a lot of young entrepreneurs or business people are maybe not doing? Or obviously there's no secret sauce. I mean, as we all know, it's you get where you get by doing the hard work. But I mean, is there something that's missing? Is there a key ingredient missing somewhere?
Yeah, I do. I actually work with, I try to do a lot of mentorship and advising. I do my board work. I do a lot of advising of the CEOs of the nonprofits. What I find with entrepreneurs in general is that, one, if you're trying to make it on your own without any input from anyone else, that's a huge failure, because you don't know everything, right? You need to learn from other people, and you need to create almost like a little advisory council of people that you trust, that you respect, that you can run ideas by and not feel uncomfortable, with those ideas, or talking to them very honestly. I think too is, if you don't listen to feedback and you just think this, I was working with a young entrepreneur, and he had this idea, and I said, oh, this sounds great. Why don't we talk to other people that might be interested in either purchasing this or using this, to get different perspectives? And everyone was really honest with them. It's like, this doesn't seem like a good idea, right? And, first it's hard to hear that, but they would give him feedback to say, you should think about these things, or maybe this part of your idea is really where you should focus, because that's really the central key to the whole business model. It's not these other things that you're trying to attach to it. So being open to feedback and not getting upset, right? When it's our baby, we want right. people to just say, it's great, good job, you're going to be great, and it's going to make you tons of money.
Yeah.
And I'd rather someone say, this is a horrible idea, don't waste your time. Or, this is a good idea, but here are the things that are wrong with it, so you can adjust to it. And I think that's one of the biggest things is, one is, and I say this to people, is everyone wants to be the hero of their own story. So, right, I built this, I did this, I did that. And it's kind of like, well, you really need that support from your community to help you. And don't feel awkward, or don't feel like you didn't do something special just because someone else gave you an idea or helped you through the process. Really embrace those things and be open to the feedback, because that's really the only way you're going to be successful.
I think that component tends to be missing from students a lot. They don't really seek, I think they get so caught, on their goal-oriented directions, like I need to do X, Y, Z, and they just think of it as I need to do this. And, right. I think that is really probably, I agree. I think that's probably explains what I'm seeing when I talk to all these business majors, and I see them semester after semester, or, we keep in touch over social media. And I just feel like, obviously, I feel like it's an educational error, in that what we're not teaching young business people and entrepreneurs. So, that's a kind of a different discussion, but yeah, I think that hits the nail on the head from what I'm seeing.
That's the problem with the grading system, because everyone's sort of trained to want A's, and the real world kicks you in the behind instead. And that's how that's how you get better, is by, getting back up after you've been kicked, not by hearing, no, you're doing great, here's a pat on the head, you're top in your class. That's not going to get you where you want to go, because you're not always going to be, especially when you first start, you're not going to be the best in the market when you first start if you've never sold anything before.
Right.
So
I think too, just to add on to that, one of the things I remember Ray talking about was he wasn't successful with his hedge fund until he hired an encyclopedia salesman. And because he was not a good salesperson, he was not good at presenting, he was not good at doing the relationship management, things like that. When he first started out, he just had a concept, and he kind of was just, I think, railing it down people's throats and saying, this is the best idea. And this guy, he hired this guy who was an encyclopedia salesman, and that was one of his first hires. And that's what really got him to be where he is now, by hiring people that were complementary to his skill set, not people that just said yes, or went along with the flow. I know what I'm good at and what I'm not good at. And I think everyone should self-analyze it, not try to be everything, because you can't. And once you find that out, you have to then find people that complement those skills and say, okay, like, I'm really good at high level strategic vision and, ideas and problem solving. I suck at implementing things. Like, if we say, all right, we get out of this meeting and said, all right, Dom's in charge of making sure we implement this program, I just say to people, that's not what I should be doing, because it's not going to go well, and I'm going to take forever, because you spend so much more time doing things you don't want to do or you're not good at. So why not utilize your highest and best use and find someone else that's complementary, that they love that, right? So like Families First, when I first joined there, I gave them a lot. Families First is a local nonprofit that works with behavioral health issues and child abuse and parenting guidance and all kinds of great mental health programs and family support. And we hired a development director, and I would just tell her all these ideas and she would implement them. And it worked great, because I'm not good at those things and she was. And so, if you find those kind of people that complement your skill set, hold them dearly, hold them close, because they're going to help you be successful. And don't take them for granted.
Anything I've ever had to collaborate on, I think that's the biggest thing you can do to be successful, is find people that, have a good inventory of yourself, know what your weaknesses are. And if you're creating a team, you want to surround people, or, get opinions from people, consult with people who are, stronger in those, weak areas. That's 100% right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think my boss would tell you exactly the same thing about me. Great ideas, sucks at implementation.
It's a weakness for a lot of people. It's not.
Yeah. I mean, but here we are on our, what is this, third or fourth podcast? So yeah. So we're
well, really, I think it's probably number 4, really, if you count with your interview with Tanya.
Yeah, and I had one with Shane as well. So
right, that's right. So 5 maybe.
So yeah, maybe I'll number this 5. I think. Yeah. Okay. I'll go back and renumber those other ones. But yeah, I mean, by the time I get to 100, that'll be like a real landmark. But this is actually really fun to do. So this isn't that hard to implement. It's the reports and the busy work and the tedious stuff that just drives me nuts. I can barely manage, but. That's part of it when you're first starting out. And so I really appreciate that advice that, maybe get a virtual assistant or something like that. I don't know what the solution is yet, but I'm very much open to, listening to whatever advice and suggestions I can get from people who have done the things I want to do. I think that's important too, because I get a lot of advice from people who haven't done anything and tell me I should just quit. And
that's sad.
Yeah. But I mean, that's part of, you have to let those things roll off your back too, because after you've tried a few things and you failed at those things, and everybody's like, oh, this is going to be just like the other thing that you didn't do well. And, but you just keep going.
They're probably projecting their fears on you. That's the problem.
Yeah, that projection, that is so crazy. I encounter that so much. You're exactly right.
Isn't that a sign most entrepreneurs say, if people telling me it's a bad idea, I know I'm going in the right direction?
Yeah.
Say?
If someone who's never studied it at all is and you're trying to explain it to them and they're like, no, it can never work. And then you explain it to somebody who, has some experience in the field and they're like, yeah, that's a pretty good idea. Then
if everybody's thinking it's a bad idea, then that's why it's never been done.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Well, and that's like, maybe this is a good place to segue my excitement about crypto. So this has been my first $1,000 day with my investments. It's just,
You're very happy.
blowing up. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm happy today because I know tomorrow is probably going to be down 800, you know? But so enjoy it while it lasts. But
I think that I just want to add one more thing. I think, for students that are entrepreneurial is really identifying what success means to them. Because a lot of people think just because you have money means you're successful. And, if you want to change the world, it might not be money that you're seeking. It might be implementing something that lifts other people up or helps people that can't help themselves and things like that. So I think, Ray has a principle, and it says, if you're always, it's basically identify what you really want in life. And I think he posted it today on Facebook, but he's like, if you want to be a couch potato, then identify. He doesn't care what you want to be, just know what you want to do and what you want to be, and then go towards that goal. Right. And so a lot of people think just because someone has money that they're successful, and it's really doesn't have anything to do with money. You can have $1 billion and be the saddest person in the world. And as someone who's run a lot of financial plans in my life, one of the things I notice is you can have someone that's made decent money and is living off of $60,000 a year, and they're going to be fine the rest of their life. And people that make $1 million a year and spend $2 million a year, and they're never going to be able to retire. So it's really about peace. I would say peace of mind, the journey, like enjoying the journey, and also, being impactful to your community. I mean, you only get one chance at this life. What's your legacy going to be, right? Is it, being a billionaire? Is that what you want to be? Okay. No, not a lot of people are going to just say, oh, I remember Dom, he was a billionaire. They're going to say, no, Dom helped me with my business, or Dom, was very involved in the community, or Dom, blah, blah, blah. That's, the things that you do are the ones that people remember, not just how much money you have.
I know Jesse wants to talk about cryptocurrency, and I know we're at the 30-minute mark, but real quick while we're talking about it, Dom, we've come up on this a few times about, giving back and serving on nonprofits. What got you, because not as many people as I would hope, seem to be as charitable and, interested in the community as you are in that sense. I don't talk to people that are, young entrepreneurs, and they're like, some of them, sure, I'm sure they're out there, but I don't come across a lot of them who are saying, I'm also volunteering over here, I'm doing this or that. What got you specifically so interested in it? And, what kind of drove you down that path?
Well, like I said before, I grew up in a low income area right outside of Philadelphia, Darby, Pennsylvania. And I moved there when I was 10, and it was very diverse. It was a low income area, and we did all right. We owned a pizza shop. It's not like we were killing it, but what I realized is that I was really lucky to make it out of there and, have the path that I've had. And my father passed away when I was 22. I was just about to graduate college. So I really started working on raising money for American Cancer Society. Like I would do the Relay for Life and things like that. And I really enjoyed not only commemorating my father, but raising money and feeling like I was doing something good. And after about 5 years of doing that, I said, I don't want to just raise money. I want to get involved with a nonprofit at the operational level so I can be more impactful. So I wanted to be part of the board, strategic thinking, help with the programs. And so I joined a nonprofit in Wilmington called Neighborhood House, which works with low-income families. I've always focused on low-income families because that's where I grew up, and I wanted to give as many people the help that I received with neighbors or other people in my life that really took an interest in me. We had a Tom and Jane Clark were neighbors down the street from me from my pizza shop, and they basically knew we didn't have a lot of money. We'd shop at the thrift store, and Christmas, they'd take us out to buy us sneakers and a jacket and stuff like that. And they became like surrogate grandparents. So for me, it was the kindness of others that made me want to help other people. And so as I went along my journey and I became more successful, I really focused more and more on giving back, because I just know that there's so many people out there that could be the next, Ray Dalios or the next whoever, or just really good community, members of the community that could do really good, great impacts and help other people. And I want to give them that opportunity if they're open to it. So I'm on 5 boards now. One of them is from my high school up north, and then four of them down here. And really, most of them focus on low-income families, homelessness, things like that.
That's awesome to hear.
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely, thank you.
Yeah, I think the feeling of contribution and the fact of living with your values, living consistently with your values, is the far more important thing than achieving some sort of external status. And that's where the people who are miserable, that's where I think they really fall prey to that, is just making money for the sake of making money so that they can show it off or something like that. That will make you miserable. But that's why I think, as we become a more prosperous society, and as we hopefully learn how to allocate those resources more broadly, some people are worried about, like, for example, with universal basic income or something like that, that people would stop working and not have a purpose in life if they weren't working. I tend to think it's very close to the opposite of that, where if we weren't working jobs that we had to work just to survive, then we would start working the kind of jobs that we believe make a difference, or we would start doing the sort of tasks. So there's not an external or a monetary reward for doing the things that you're doing in the community. And yet those give you a lot of fulfillment, it sounds like, Dom.
Oh, it does. I mean, I've been involved with nonprofits now for almost 20 years. So when you find out the impact that the nonprofit has on families, like obviously, during the pandemic and during economic downturns, nonprofits are really the lifeblood of what's going on. They're the ones helping the people on the front lines, right? And so I remember during 2008 when I was with Neighbor House, they said we have people that never have asked for food coming to our food bank, because they're middle income people. They were making it, and now all of a sudden they lost their job and they need to come in to get groceries to feed their family. And the same thing with this pandemic. There's a lot of struggle out there. And when the government can't act fast enough, right? It's not like they can go out to the communities and give, the needed benefits that are needed in the community during those downturns. It's people turn to the nonprofit community. So the Feed Americas and all these other places, they're the lifeblood of keeping our families fed during economic downturns. And I think we take it for granted. Now, there's a lot of nonprofits. I mean, there's so many nonprofits. Sometimes I think it's a little overwhelming, and you really have to focus on what your values are and find a nonprofit that meets those, what you're looking to get out of it. But I get so much out of it. I mean, when I'm not a big praise guy, I don't need a lot of praise, but when I hear people say we wouldn't have been this successful the last 10 years if you didn't join our board, or, I remember my first meeting at Families First. I got up, I'm this, 33-year-old guy, and these board members have been involved with this nonprofit forever. And I was just like, listen, man, this isn't you don't take a board seat if you're not going to do anything. If you're on this board, everyone needs to be developing, looking for funds. It's all of our jobs. And, implementing a different development strategy to reallocate from just, grants and things like that to more individual donations and getting our name out in the community. And, I'm proud of that. I'm proud that people know who Families First is. And I'm proud that I was involved in that journey and helping them through what at the time that they needed me most, I was there for them. And it was with a lot of other people that were great and community leaders. And like I said, Sam, who's the development director, and Julie Swindler, who's the CEO, like listening to ideas, but also implementing them. And so, I look at it, although I'm not doing the work on the ground, I'm helping the people that are doing the work on the ground be successful. And so I'm advising, and I feel good about that. I love doing the stuff on the ground as well. If I get a chance to do it, I'll do it and volunteer and help out, because I do like that aspect as well.
But the first stage for you was to not be poor yourself, right? So you got out of poverty first. And I think that's where a lot of our students are focused, is trying to get themselves and their immediate families out of poverty, or well, I guess right now in this situation, it is poverty for a lot of people that weren't necessarily poor to start with, but the pandemic, like you were saying, has definitely put a lot of strain on a lot of people. So as people are going through that process, what are some of the pieces of advice from like a financial someone who's been in that realm as a financial expert? What are some of the things that you would advise them to do and to not do? What are some of the things that could really derail them if they aren't aware of it?
Yeah, I think you have to have personal goals for yourself. I remember when I first started at Chase or JP Morgan, and they were talking about, funding your 401k and how important it is to start early, and the compounding interest, and, all that stuff. And, I'm actually going to be talking to one of my nonprofit, their whole staff, about contributing to their 401k, because they're not utilizing that tool. It doesn't make sense sometimes when you're 23 years old and you're like, I really don't want to put 3 to 6% or 10% of my money into a 401k. But the reason why some people are very successful is because they started early, and then by the time they're 60, they have $2 million in their 401ks, and it gives them a lot of financial freedom. So it's that kind of like that delayed gratification that we talked about earlier. If you can afford to put money in to the 401k and just look at the lowest cost options of your 401k plan, because the higher the fee does not equate to higher results. In really focusing on, when you're younger, making sure you have higher equities and not as much fixed income and things like that. And just leaving it alone, just letting it do what it does. That's a really important concept. And I think, you don't want to sacrifice your future to help other people, especially at a young age, right? You need to focus on building yourself up so that you can be, because if you're poor and you need the services of the nonprofit, you're not helping the nonprofit. Now you are a client of the nonprofit, right? So you have to stabilize yourself. And I tend to overdo it. I'm going to be completely honest. I definitely overdo it with helping nonprofits. I mean, it's just a character flaw. And that's why I always say I'm never going to be a rich person, because the more money I make, the more money I give to nonprofits, right? It's just my nature. I just tend to do that. But I also contribute to my 401k. I have IRAs, rollover IRAs from my prior employers that I invest. I try to take care of those things, and I have trying to diversify my income stream and things like that. And, you don't want to sacrifice your future for today. The biggest problem, though, and I don't think people really understand this, and I love watching documentaries and things like that. And so one of the biggest things is, before like 1982 or 83, we were a savings culture. Like our society was more savers than spenders. And they did a study that showed that the Reagan film that showed the nuclear bomb explode, and I forget what, the End of Days, I think it was called, or whatever, that it created a psychological issue where people were so worried about the Cold War that they literally stopped worrying about the future, and they just started spending now, because they didn't care about the future. They just said, I want to get as much out of my spending now and just live my life, right? And that's the same thing with poor people, right?
YOLO mentality.
Yeah. Basically, it's 1982 or three, whatever. But it's the same mentality with low income people. Is psychologically they don't think about being 70, and I'm going to retire and have a great life. They're surviving, right? And so to get them to think like instead of buying your kids really expensive shoes, why not buy Nike stock, or give them two shares of Nike, each Christmas or something like that, or Disney or whatever. Like to them, it's like it doesn't make sense. To them, they're like, I'm not even going to make it to 65, right? The chances are I'm going to die in my 50s or 40s or 50s or 60s, whatever. So it's trying to change that mentality that it's not just a foregone conclusion. Just because you're poor doesn't mean you're always going to be poor. You can lift yourself out of that if you have the right tools and you talk to the right people. But it's just like anything, right? It's a lot of, things happen by chance. You meet the right people, you take the right advice, you might get burnt a few times, and then you give up. Sometimes you give up because you're like, you know what? It's hard. It's hard to do the right thing, right? And you just kind of go through life and just hope for the best. And I think that's the problem right now is getting out of that mentality and trying to give people the light at the end of the tunnel. And I was just talking to my wife the other day about this, when you're in a low income area, the food deserts and all that stuff, you're eating crap all the time. I was talking to Kevin about it. Yes, the other day at lunch. You're eating crap all the time. By the time you're in your 40s and 50s, you probably have heart disease, and, at that point, you're not really thinking about, I'm going to be 70 or 80 in my retirement. You're just kind of going along and hoping to be alive in the next 5 years to see your grandkids kind of thing. So there's so many things that can be obstacles to your success. And I think a lot of people just ignore them, right? They just say, well, this is my circumstance. I live here, my kids are this, nothing's ever going to change. I'm just going to wake up and go to my job. And it's like, no, there's so many things you can do to change your circumstances and not give up on yourself, and you talked about universal income. I think, when you're struggling and you're stressed out about where the next meal's coming or if, how you're going to pay your rent, it's a lot of stress to put on people. And, eventually they break and they just say, you know what, I can't do this anymore. And they end up going bankrupt or they get kicked out and they're homeless. We're expecting people to be resilient when they're always in survival mode. And you can't sustain that for a long period of time. Like there has to be a point where something happens where you catch a break, right? And I think we should really be looking into the universal basic income. I think it will not only free people up to give them a little space to make better decisions. I think it'll give people the opportunity to leave their jobs and go to try something different, right? And say, I'm going to take a chance on myself. I'm going to go back to school to educate myself. I'm going to take that job that might be a little bit further because I can now afford a car, those kind of things. And so it's really important. It's easy to look at people when you're, successful or, and say, oh, they're just lazy. Poor people work harder than I work. I mean, I don't even work that hard. I sit behind the desk, I run plans, I answer questions about stuff. Like it's not hard. I'm not physically taxed. I worked harder when I was a landscaper in college, physically. So, sorry, got on the soapbox there.
No, I'm gonna stay on that soapbox because it was actually Andrew Yang's campaign and the talk about universal basic income that started me thinking in an abundance mindset. Because up until then, I did have a very scarcity based kind of mindset in the sense that I was not willing to take risks. I was not willing to invest more than, and you put your finger right on it. It's like, there is no tomorrow, right? It looks like everything's going to crash. Everything's going to fall apart. And so, I had a lot of really negative mindsets when it came to money, and that prevented me from taking action. And so I only started podcasting, investing, writing, reading more regularly. And, I've signed up for all these different business opportunities, and none of them have really been right for me, but I know that they all work. You know what I mean? It's one of those things where I'm just trying I'm trying to find the thing that feels right for me. But I didn't even start down that path until about a year and a half ago, when I found out about Andrew Yang and universal basic income, because it got me thinking, like, what if everyone could have that extra money? I mean, I'm kind of okay with the full-time job I have, but it's precarious because, and the pandemic showed us that. And so it was only the idea, though, of universal basic income that got me moving this far. Imagine what the actual thing could do. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it really did show me the way that it's like that would liberate people, because I know from working with students that when they're nervous and they're anxious and they're afraid that they're going to fail, they do, because they can't think straight. They're in that survival mode, and it's like a barrier that prevents people from moving forward. So I think that's probably one of the biggest things. If we could just get people feeling safe enough and feeling relaxed enough to start thinking long-term, taking some actions that would be to their long-run benefit, stopping smoking, all these little things that allow them to save up. If I had not gone out to dinner with my ex-girlfriend all those years ago and put it in Bitcoin instead, I mean, where would I be, right?
Yeah.
And I think that too, all those things you listed that students do sometimes, and everybody does sometimes, everybody's different, but what people do when they're rationalizing things, they tend to be those negative things. So when they have these stresses, they do what? They go out and eat more. They eat fast food because they're stressed on time. They smoke, they drink. So all these things compound themselves in a negative way. And then my only comment on UBI, what really gets me about UBI is how little the people that oppose it actually understand it. Because, I feel like if they really understood it, they'd probably be less against it, but that's just me, I guess.
Well, I mean, I saw Senator Romney propose like a $350, allowance basically per month for kids, right? And I think to myself, like, it solves a lot of problems, right? Because one, kids are expensive. I mean, that's like the diapers for a kid for a month, I mean, it's like ridiculous. I was so excited when my son got out of diapers. And then once my daughter got out of diapers, it was now I'm, he's in college and my daughter's going in high school. So it's like a completely different obstacles. But, it makes sense because it's hard, I think. And I want to do some kind of illustrations to explain to people why, debt relief or student loan relief and other things, why it makes sense for the economy, right? Because if you're always paying your debts, right, like the only companies that benefit from are the companies you're indebted to, right? But if you're not paying your debts and you're actually going out to Walmarts and the mall and the local businesses to shop, then you're actually helping the economy. So I don't think people realize that, it's really a bottom up approach that you got to look at, because if you don't help the bottom, there's not going to be consumers of your goods. Like you have to get the base strong before you can focus on the top. And I think that's why some of the policies with the trickle down and all that stuff doesn't make any sense, because you're basically hoping that the people that get the money will trickle it down to people that don't. And that's usually not what happens, right? And I always have this argument with people about, a business isn't going to hire someone because they get a tax credit for it. Not likely. They're going to hire someone because someone's buying their goods, right? And their demand says you need to hire someone in order to do these things to help with production, all right? And so, when the policies are passed with the Tax Act, where it says, repatriate your money, we'll give you a low tax rate on it and things like that. Why didn't they also say you can't rebuy your stock with it. You have to do something productive with it. Right? Why not put more stipulations? And we're just trust people to do the right things. It doesn't, most people don't do the things that benefit humanity. They do the things that benefit them, right? So why trust people to do the right thing? Force them to do it with the tax code, Stop giving everyone so many options.
Yeah, well, especially the people who don't really need it. I mean, there's so much wealth accumulating at the top, and you hear many of the people that it's accumulating into the hands of saying, we really don't need this, right? We need to come up with a different way of redistributing this, because we already have enough money. We don't need more.
Well, Elon Musk tweeted like 2 weeks ago, he's like, it's really hard to give away this much money.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like when he's at like $200 billion or whatever, because Tesla's like taking over the world. But he's like, he literally tweeted like, it's really hard to give away this much money. He's like, Brewster's Millions, right? It's like, you have to give it. Once you accumulate so much money, you have to do something with it, right? Because you're just going to pay tax on it. So, 40% of an estate tax on $200 billion, that's a lot of money. So then they start giving it away. It's like the Carnegies and the Morgans and all that stuff. I love the Men Who Built America on the History Channel, like seeing how Rockefellers and Carnegie and all these people, like they accumulate so much wealth. And then at the end of their life, they're like, we got to give it as much, we got to give it all away. And it's like, what if you just gave it away as you're accumulating? Give some of it away so that you don't have all this pressure to give it away at the end. Like, do something with it during your life that's productive, so that you can see the fruits of your labors and see how it helps your community, right?
I think
if you just wait till the end, like these people that some clients that I work with, they're like, I want to help my family, but I really also want to help charity. And it's like, do both, like why do you have to pick one or the other? You could do both of those things.
That's a perfect way to segue to how I want to close this out, which is to give you a chance, Dom, to tell us, how can we help the charities that you find to be the most in need right now, or the most where we in the college community could serve?
Well, there's one I just got involved with. I'm actually the chair of the board, called Suits for Seniors, and Guy, do you know them?
Yeah, they're like down in South County, right? I think I've seen a bunch of their stuff on Instagram, I believe.
Yeah, they're in West Palm Beach.
Okay.
Tay Edmonds is the CEO and founder, and he goes to these schools and gets kids to enroll in an 8-week program where they talk about financial literacy, investing, entrepreneurship, like all these great things. And then at the end of the 8-week program, they get suits. And so it gives them confidence that they've been successful, and tries to and they have like 100% graduation rate, but it teaches them the fundamentals of the foundation for them to be successful. I'm on the board of Vita Nova Inc., which is a homeless youth 18 to 25, where basically a lot of these kids are foster care kids that age out of foster care and get dropped off, and says, okay, you're 18. I'm not getting paid by the state anymore. You got to figure this out on your own. And that they provide basically housing and services to get them on their feet, get them enrolled in college or trade school or job and things like that. And I mentioned Families First. And there's so many great organizations in this community. But what I would say is, figure out what you're passionate about, like what you really want to focus on, and just Google nonprofits in that space. Like, I found Families First through United Way. I went on United Way's website and I just basically read all the mission statements of the nonprofits in the area. And I found Families First, which is something I'm so grateful for. But they're always looking for people to join their boards or committees or get involved. I mean, there's so much need to help in this community. And there's so much, I remember when I first moved down here and I was working in Palm Beach, and then I took the back way home one time on, US 1. And I'm like going through Northwood, and I'm like, I see like hookers walking down the street. And I'm like, I just left Palm Beach, like the richest place in the world. And a mile away are streetwalkers with like hourly rate hotels. I'm like, what is going on here? Like, it blew my mind. Like, I couldn't imagine the juxtaposition of those two images in my head. Like, I'm like, how does that happen? Right. But there is, I mean, you don't think of Palm Beach County as an in-need county, but there's a lot of people here that need a lot of help. And, you know, there's lack of affordable housing, you know, there's all kinds of issues, you know, food insecurity. You know, we talked about the stress of students. I mean, if you're hungry, you can't learn. Like, you gotta have a full belly to not, you know, so you can concentrate on what the teacher's saying. So, you know, there's so many obstacles that we unfortunately put in our future's way, right? And we can solve them by just putting some really smart programs in place and getting people the tools that they need to be successful. And then they become better for our community. You know, they're not on the streets asking for money. They're not looking for food in the dumpster. Like, they have the tools that they need to be successful, which makes our community successful. These people aren't just homeless. They're our neighbors. They just live on the street, right? And the problem now is that not in my backyard syndrome of, you know, nobody wants affordable housing in their community. Nobody wants to put shelters. Nobody wants to do these things. And it's like, it's got to go somewhere. And it's our responsibility, I think, as citizens to be good citizens and be good stewards of our communities and help our neighbors. So,
well, we would love to be a partner with you in that. And, you know, if you see ways where we can specifically help out to do that, you know, I'd love to be part of that. And
definitely.
And I appreciate you being a partner to us and sharing so much of this knowledge and experience that you've acquired with our students and with our participants. So thank you
Thanks
so much.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
I really appreciate it. And I look forward to continuing the discussion.
Me too.
Thanks, Dom. That was great.
All right, thanks, guys. I'm gonna go ahead and close it out, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Kevin, for introducing us.
Oh. And Jesse, can I come back to the math lab at some point?
If I can, I'm not even there anymore right now, but hopefully we'll be back live. But yeah, I'm looking forward to that day.
Awesome.
All right,
Have
guys.
a great weekend, guys.
All right, thanks. Take care, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.